Shall we play a game?
Oh.
Hi, I'm Jeff and welcome to A Million Movies. And did you know that the 1983 movie War Games played a key role in raising awareness about cybersecurity and computer hacking? In fact, President Reagan watched the film at Camp David the day after the movie was released in theaters, and the following week, during a meeting on national security, he asked if it was possible for someone to break into our computer systems. General John Vesey, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, dug into the question and found that not only was it possible, but it was plausible, especially since the US government had been hacking into China's and the USSR systems for years. Cybersecurity became a key focus for the US government, and the following year the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was passed to protect US businesses and our citizens from unauthorized access to computers and computer systems. And that's the first of 16 facts I'm going to share today about war games. So if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin.
Not only did war games lead to changes in cybersecurity policy, but it also helped shape the language of hacking itself. For example, War Games is the first movie to use the term firewall to mean a barrier or protective measures meant to block access to a computer system.
Can we invade the deep logic?
We keep hitting a damn firewall.
Now, of course, the term firewall had been around since at least the 1850s, but only in the context of a barrier to prevent fire from spreading, as in a building or between the engine compartment and the rest of a car. But War Games is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, use of the term firewall to mean a protective barrier in a computer system. Initial interest among the studios for War Games was actually pretty low. Most of the studios didn't understand the story, and they thought it was science fiction. Only United Artists MGM showed interest in it and understood that instead of being science fiction, War Games was likely science fact. Even so, while they were writing the script, screenwriters Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parks thought the story might be a little too far-fetched, until one day when Parks was watching the news and he saw a report where the US government thought that they were under attack because someone left the simulation program in one of the computers. That convinced him to keep working on the story. A big reason that War Games was able to be so far in front on the topic of hacking is because of the research the screenwriters Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parks did as they were developing the script. Among the hackers they met with were John Captain Crunch Draper, who discovered that blowing into a whistle that you could find in the bottom of a cereal box could unlock the networks of the Bell telephone systems, allowing him to get free telephone calls. And David Scott Lewis, who had a specialty of being able to find backdoor entrances into more secure systems. Many of David Scott Lewis's techniques, such as what he calls war dialing, where you have the computer dial sequential phone numbers to try and find access points, and doing research on your subject to find backdoor passwords, were used in the movie. It's even been reported that the trick of setting the number of players in a game to 0 was inspired by hacks Draper, Lewis, and other hackers told the writers.
Is there any way to make it play itself?
Yes, number of players 0.
Lasker and Parks made so many connections into the hacking world that they used these stories as the basis for a later movie they wrote together as well, the 1992 cyber thriller Sneakers. In the war dialing scenes where David's computer is automatically calling thousands of numbers, we see that the numbers don't have the usual 555 prefix we're used to seeing in the movies. Instead, we see that all the numbers are for the 311 area code. Using 311 as the area code solves the same problem, since the area code for 311 does not exist and will never be used for real telephone numbers. That's because 311 was set aside years ago by the phone companies to be reserved for special purposes, just like 411 and 911. Today, 311 is used primarily for non-emergency government services like getting local information or for reporting potholes or graffiti. Matthew Broderick's character of David Lightman wasn't the only character based on a real person. The role of Professor Falcon was inspired by Stephen Hawking. In fact, Professor Hawking was approached about appearing in the movie, but he decided against it. Another early choice for the role of Falcon was John Lennon, who has shown some interest in the role. After John Lennon was shot in 1980, the team gave the role to English actor John Wood. Now, the idea of having the Falcon character using a motorized wheelchair was still in the script, though, but the idea was dropped after they realized the character might appear to be too much like Dr. Strangelove. In addition to playing Professor Falcon, John Wood also provided the voice of the computer Joshua.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
To get the delivery he wanted, director John Badham had the actor read the lines word by word, but in reverse. He felt that if you have to read a sentence in reverse, it's very hard to build a rhythm to that sentence, and the phrase will come out flatter like a computer might sound. So instead of, "Shall we play a game?" you record, "Game A, play, we shall," which when remixed into the correct order sounds like this. Shall we play a game? Add in some modulation effects and you'll sound just like a computer.
Shall we play a game?
A final character that was based on a real person was the role of General Behringer, played by Barry Corbin. While they were developing their script, Lasker and Parks arranged to take a tour of the real NORAD, and as they were leaving, NORAD's commander, James Hartinger, came up behind them and asked them if these were the guys that were going to write a movie about him, and invited them to have a drink with him. The commander was such an interesting person that they included a lot of his personality and characteristics into the character of General Behringer.
Somebody's playing a game with us.
General Behringer, of course, oversees the NORAD Command Center, and at the time the NORAD set was the most expensive set ever constructed, with a price tag of $1 million. Since the producers weren't allowed into the real command center, they had to build the set based on what they imagined it would look like. It was later pointed out that the real NORAD Command Center was not nearly as elaborate as the one in the movie. For the exteriors of the command center, the production didn't head all the way up to the Cheyenne Mountains. Instead, they just headed over to Griffith Park in Los Angeles, where they used the tunnel just up from the Griffith Observatory. And if that tunnel looks familiar, it's because you've probably seen it in movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Back to the Future Part 2. That location was also the site of a stunt that went wrong. According to director John Badham, the scene where the Jeep crashes through the gate and then turns over was an actual accident. The Jeep was supposed to continue through the gate, but when the Jeep rolled over, they decided to make that part of the action, and added the scene of the characters running from the Jeep and down the tunnel. Making all these decisions about what stays in a movie or gets cut out is the job of the movie's director. While John Badham is listed as the director for WARGAMES, Martin Brest was actually the first director on the film. Brest had a darker, thriller-style movie in mind, rather than the fun hacker adventure the studio wanted. And after 2 weeks of shooting, the studio didn't like what they were seeing, and they replaced him with John Badham. Now, 2 of the scenes that Martin Brest shot did make it into the final film, though. One is the scene where David goes to meet the hackers.
Hey, what's that?
And there's also the scene where he hacks a payphone after sneaking out of NORAD. According to Badham, part of the problem with the work Brest had done was that Matthew Broderick's and Ali Sheedy's characters weren't having any fun. The characters were coming across as if they were in a conspiracy thriller, when initially they just wanted to change their grades and play some new games. To get a little more fun injected into the film, he encouraged the actors to improvise. Ali Sheedy trapping Matthew Broderick with her legs was an improvisation that came out of this attitude, as was most of Barry Corbin's dialogue, including this classic line.
God damn it, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it'd do any good. Let the boy in there, Major.
Humor became a big part of the production, and one joke in particular from an early scene stands out. It happens when David makes a joke directed at his teacher about asexual reproduction.
Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Get out, Mikey. Get out.
The laughter heard afterward was supposed to be only from the kids in the classroom, but some of the crew didn't know the punchline and they laughed out loud, and their laughs made it into the movie. That's not to say the movie is all laughs. John Badham recognized that he needed to add some other emotions into the film, especially during the last act of the movie, which is filled with action sequences and scenes full of tension, and he wanted to give the audience a chance to catch its breath. So he reached out to screenwriter and noted script doctor Tom Mankiewicz, who created the scene on the shores near Falcon's house, where Matthew Broderick regrets not ever learning how to swim.
You can't swim?
No, I can't, okay? Wonder Woman, I can't swim.
Well, what kind of an grows up in Seattle and doesn't even know how to swim.
I never got around to it, okay? I always thought there was gonna be plenty of time.
Unlike a lot of 80s movies, there isn't a big hit song featured in the film. Crosby, Stills & Nash did submit a song for the soundtrack called WARGAMES, but it was edited out of the film just before the movie was released. And even though it wasn't used in the film, United Artists still released the song and made a video for it using clips from the movie. Over the years, WARGAMES has continued to have an impact on our culture. For example, the tic-tac-toe scene was used as part of a montage in the Strokes video for their song Hard to Explain. And reenacting the movie as David Lightman line by line was one of the puzzles in Ernest Cline's novel Ready Player One. And finally, one of the largest hacker conventions in the world took its name, DEF CON, from WARGAMES.